Hey all, and welcome back in. Well, this is episode 2 of our, let's call it a Saturday matinee. This is where science fiction meets reality here. We're going to kind of suspend all belief. We're going to base it a little bit loosely, a lotly, on Battle of Britain scenes where the Germans might have crashed into a farm scene and then the English townfolk and farmers take the pilot prisoner. But of course, we're going to mash those two together with a futuristic 40K Warhammer spaceship and these townsfolk taking this prisoner. Let's just have some fun. Well, we've got a lot of townsfolk that we'll be painting a little bit later in this video, but let's start off and come back with a spaceship. In the last episode, and you haven't looked at that yet, please check that out, episode number 1. Well, we detailed out basically this 40K Warhammer Wave Serpent with a lot of photo etch. Didn't do a lot of construction on it, but just a little bit of detailing. And then, of course, we started a little bit of the weathering process by distressing the paint using the chipping fluids, just kind of peeling back some of those layers of paint to show some chips and a little bit heavier wear. Now, if you've looked back at any of my history of model making, you'll know that a Warhammer, well, there's not one of those in my library. I've never worked on one before. But I'm going to approach this in exactly the same manner as if this were something that was more in my comfort zone, say, an armor kit. And of course, if you watched any of my prior videos on this channel, you'll notice that I have an affinity for using oil colors, oil paints. And that's, of course, what I'll be using on this model as well. This is kind of an interesting model to weather if you think about it. Well, first off, as I mentioned in the first video, it didn't have a lot of surface details, so that's why I added a lot of the photo etch onto it, just to give some nuanced personality, surface details, that kind of thing, in order for this part of the process to have a little bit of something to grab onto. One of the great things about working on a fantasy figure such as this is that, who knows what it really looks like when some spacecraft that's been flying around at hyperspeeds out in space crashes into Earth. So I have some opportunities to take a few liberties along the way with the weathering, maybe a little more exaggerated than I might otherwise do. But that's why I chose to do a project like this, because it's going to be, well, a lot of fun. In terms of technique or process, the oil colors are placed onto a little cardboard palette that pulls out the linseed oil, lets it seep out, and then the paints are applied to the surface of the model with just the slightest amount of odorless thinner, just enough to allow them to move around a little bit. And then the editing process where you can come back in and add a little bit more paint, or using a second brush as a blending brush and feather and soften some of those effects here and there. Now, while this spacecraft will be onto a diorama scene, so it'll fall into Earth, I'm not necessarily worried, like I usually might be, of tying this model's color scheme necessarily with the Earth's color scheme. So I'm using yellowish tones for the dirt and grime, thinking, well, I don't know, it looks a little bit more outer spacey. And I think it's going to make a little bit of a subtle contrast between the natural landscape, the natural Earth textures and tones that'll be on the diorama base, and some of these more, we'll call them alien or foreign colors that will be on the spacecraft. Just a few details to take care of here before we put everything together. So these little bumps, I'm going to treat them as navigation or say landing lights. A quick pass with a little bit of chrome colored acrylic paint and then a drop or two of Tamiya clear. And there we go. And then I can mate up the top and the bottom. And I'm not really worried about the bottom side of this because, again, this is going to be crash landed onto a diorama scene. You'll never see any of that. And then we've got these weapons, and I'm not sure what to do with these. They could be super high-tech, or maybe they're low-tech. If you remember in the last episode, I kind of thought that these could have a little bit of a steampunk look. I added those little pieces of wire. So I've painted the guns themselves a black color, and then I'm using copper on those little wires. That gives it that steampunky type of effect. And then a dry brush with a little bit of pigment, some iron graphite type pigment, just to really buff and shine these things out. So it looks really nice and gleaming and ready for battle. One of my underlying themes for this diorama is going to be kind of an emphasis on the English townspeople, the civilians who contributed so much to the British war effort throughout the war. And speaking of contributing to efforts, if you haven't hit that like and subscribe button, do so right now. If you like this channel, that really does help it get to more and more people. And if you'd really like to contribute to the effort, I do of course have a Patreon page, and the link for that is in the description below. Among some of the other fun things that we do over on Patreon, well, I ran a poll there recently where the Patreons chose the pilot figure that will be shown in this scene. So you'll see that upcoming here in just a little bit. So please check it out and consider joining. And then finally, here are the stars of our show. These are the local townspeople, and they're just out minding their own business, tending to their fields when this craft crashes into their lovely, idyllic English countryside. They rush to the scene to see what happened and ultimately take this pilot prisoner. Well, all of these figures came from the company MK35, the French miniature company, and I have to say they're molded very, very nicely, and they're also very, very small. They're 1/43 scale, so this is where my figure painting techniques are going to come into a little bit of a challenge. First thing to do is just get them ready for painting, put a couple of holes in their feet, put a little bit of wire into them, and then I have my little fancy things that I made with a little bit of doweling and cork on top so I can hold them easier, and we're ready to get started. Well, now this is the part where I get to ramble about my figure painting, my painting techniques and things like that. I will say this, over the past, I don't know, what's it been, 10 months almost that this channel has been on the air, you've heard me talk about figures and how much I enjoy figures, and I think they're an important part of dioramas and diorama scenes and model scenes and such, but I've always struggled with painting them. And over the course of that same time, you've watched me try to figure out how to paint figures, and I've tried this technique or that technique. And I think I'm finally coming down to what is comfortable for me. So let me just try to talk about that very quickly here. Maybe it'll be something helpful for you. So what is this pearl of wisdom that I've found I'm going to embark upon you? Well, it basically comes down to my favorite band as a kid growing up, and that would be Kiss. And as much as I'd love to be playing some tunes for you right now, I doubt that Gene Simmons nor even YouTube would appreciate that very much. Now, the KISS I'm talking about is the KISS, an acronym, which is basically keep it simple, stupid. And I am finding that the more simple I keep my techniques and my approach, the better the results. You'll notice with these little guys, I'm not being fancy at all. There's no airbrushing, there's no over-the-top zenithal light. I've just applied a dark base color. It's burnt umber using the brush. It's acrylic. And then that's my base color. And then I just start painting. And I'm just kind of conscious, and of course this is something I've learned along the way, but just conscious of allowing those shadows to stay in place while I start working up the highlights and the colors. Practice has been the biggest teacher through this entire process. Right up the leg. Thanks, Rick. Sorry, guys. I just couldn't help myself. So what's the point here? I don't know. It's just, I think that, you know, I took a lot of ideas and techniques and influences from a lot of different people over the course of the last little while. I did a lot of practicing on my own and on this video channel. And that's really what it takes. Anything you want to do, it just takes practice and a little bit of determination. And I'm feeling much more comfortable with figures right now, and I don't hesitate to include them onto my scenes. I really like this chap because he reminds me of the fellow with the pitchfork from the opening in the last episode.
Good afternoon, my ass.
With so many figures to do, I basically kind of broke it down into a little, I guess kind of an assembly line, I guess. But I'd only work on 3 figures at the same time. So I would clean up and get ready 3 figures. So do the little bit of putty here and there, a little bit of sanding, get rid of the seam lines, put the base color on 3 figures at the same time. And then I would just start painting those three figures until complete. I always begin my painting with the face, and it's just one of those little moral victories. I guess if I feel like I can get the face in pretty good shape, well, then the rest of the figure will be okay as well. In terms of this video and these figures, I'm kind of at a loss for words right now because I think the video is kind of interesting to watch, but I don't really have a lot to say about it. Maybe this is one of those times that might be good to put a little music in the background. What do you think? Should we put something on in the background and maybe fast forward the video for just a little bit? Okay, slow down. Okay, we're back. I'm taking back control of the video. Music's over. We're back to normal speed. Let's just finish up this fellow here. Just a few glazes on his trousers just to kind of unify that appearance a little bit. We'll pop him off the little holding stick and put him on the little pink piece of foam with his other fellows. There we go. We're starting to get quite the collection, don't you think? Got one more fellow here holding his spade. Another one to add to our collection. He got finished. Got to move some fellows over there a little bit. Make room, buddy. Let's go. And then we'll pop him off. And there. Yep. That's quite the crew. What a motley crew. Another one of my band references. These are all dad jokes free of charge. Finally, here was the winner of our Patreon poll of what should our pilot look like, and he is a World War I Russian pilot, and he is from Copper State Models, and I really like this guy because just his pose, he's got that little bit of arrogance in him. It's like, yeah, you're taking me prisoner? No effing way. But anyway, I like the pose. It's a great little model. 148 scale. So again, we're playing with scales here just a little bit. We got 143rd scale. We got 148 scale. We've got our Warhammer scale, which is about 150, 152, I believe it is, someplace in there. So we're playing with scale here, but we're not going to worry about that. Once again, painting the same process. Just primed him up with a brush, and then start picking out his details here. And he'll be in all black leather, so he's going to be very sinister, kind of like a what would be Snidely Whiplash. That's the character from Bullwinkle, Snidely Whiplash. So he's going to be like that. And I like this character as well because not only does he look kind of arrogant and sinister and is black, but he also has that air of that steampunk that we're kind of working on before. And that will conclude this episode with a few views of the kind of the initial layout of the scene. So the next episode, well, of course, we'll be talking about the diorama. So we'll start putting this all together. You can see I've got a little bit of a start on this. If you enjoy this channel and enjoy this episode, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you'd like to support this channel even further, again, please consider joining the Patreon. Until the next time, we'll see you all soon. Happy modeling. Take care.